Hello everybody, it's Wyvern here with a very short informational video to discuss why, when you're deciding if you want to bring a chariot to battle, and if you're looking for a good dedicated infantry killer, why it is better in general to bring a heroic chariot rather than a normal chariot unit, whether or not the chariot unit has other superior stats, whether or not the majority of its stats and even its cost might be higher, why it's generally better to bring the heroic variant of the chariot. So I do have a little demonstration here set up. I do want this is really sort of the core of the issue. Now certainly there are the usual differences. A single model is generally easier to extract in and out of a fight. There's not much you can say about that. A single model is generally easier to extricate out of a fight. A single model, although it might have less HP, cannot have as many models in contact with it, which means it's taking less damage overall, or taking less hits overall, which generally translates to less damage, even if it does have less HP. And of course, a single model does not start losing effectiveness just because it's lost some of its models. It stays fighting at 100% until its last smidgen of HP is gone, or until it shatters. So those are the usual sort of heroic unit advantages, but in return, usually the damage output overall is much lower on heroic units. As you can see here, it's 300 compared to the only 48 on the Razor Gore. But you do have 3 Razor Gore chariots, and of course with the impact and the fact that they're plowing through 3 furrows rather than just 1, because of course impact damage is a huge chunk of a chariot's damage output, you would anticipate that the Razor Gores, especially with their much higher cost than a just normal shaman, would do better. So if we do a charge here into these Chaos Warriors, you can see here we're going to push in. You can see we've done about 5,400 damage, which is definitely not bad, and we're going to be able to push through. We've done quite a bit of damage here. We're going to get a few flailing attacks, and we're going to pull through. We've done about 5,300 damage. So look at that. These Chaos Warriors, you know, that's a respectable amount of damage. There's no denying that. 5,300 damage done for basically no damage in return. Very, very good. If we then set up for, and this is you know, that's a respectable amount of damage. Now let's concede defeat here and do a rematch. And this time around, rather than using, and I understand this is a somewhat imperfect testing method because I'm too lazy to activate the heroes only or any unit as a Lord mod for this. I don't really think it's necessary. But let's now do the same test with just our shaman doing the job, and let's look at some differences in how he performs. So, if we look real quickly, the Chaos Warriors, when they took that hit from the chariots, and approximately, you know, the chariots went in, they did some damage. The chariots took off about 1,400. On average, they're going to take off about 1,400 to 1,500 damage on the charge, because of how much charge damage they're doing, because they're hitting in 3 points. They're doing a lot of damage with their raw impact, and they've got some solid AP value, some solid bonus versus infantry. If we actually compare the bonus versus infantry, on this guy it's 24, which is basically only applies to your attack. It's basically irrelevant to the damage. Over here on these guys it's also 24, but that is a much bigger increase because there's 3 models getting it. But if we look at this impact over here, the shaman does hit. He doesn't do as much on the charge, but you can see here it's kind of a little bit of a meandering sort of push, and certainly there was a little bit of a backlight, but he pulled through a little more easily than those chariots. But as you can see there, he did, and it was about 5,400. He did got one more attack in there. But you can see, if we look, these Chaos Warriors, and he took basically no damage in that exchange. You can see he went down from 34, yeah, basically irrelevant. These guys are down 13 models. They've lost, now certainly some of this might have been lost in the last swing, but they've lost 13 models, whereas when they took that same amount of HP damage from these Razor Gore chariots, they lost no models. They were still at 75. Certainly depending on exactly how the damage distributes, you might see a loss of like 1 or 2 models. That's a huge difference. Now, certainly against Chaos, this might not be the greatest impact, because Chaos, well, certainly well, actually, you know what, it is an impact, because it reduces the amount of damage they can be doing at once, especially if you're getting surrounds on units, if you're harassing them from multiple angles, it can be a huge difference maker. But it gets factions, especially factions that have healing, let's say against Elves, against Empire. The Empire, of course, has a lot of shutdowns for chariots, so it's always risky play there, but against Elves, against Empire, against even to extent vampire counts, because there's only so much you can get out of Invocation of Nehek, against Bretonia, and against all these sorts of factions, that is incredibly beneficial, because you are making sure that no matter what they do, your opponent is not, against Lizardman, that's another great example, I think, no matter what your opponent does, he is not going to be getting those models back, or he's not going to be getting all of those models back. That is a huge benefit. And the reason for this, and I do want to mention the reason, is because of the way splash damage is distributed, as far as I am aware. So, and I'll open up the stat lines in a second just to explain this in a little more depth, but both Brave Shamans of Shadow, both the Beastmen Chariots, as well as Razor Gore Chariots, hit a maximum of 4 models with their splash. Certainly, depending on how exactly what area of unit you're impacting, or how densely packed units are around you, whatever, how many units you're actually, and plus, of course, depending on RNG, if you're actually hitting. The melee attack is, which on the charge you're basically guaranteed to hit almost every swing, but based on that, when they're only hitting 4 models apiece, that means that the Razor Gore Chariot, which has 48 damage stacked on top of bonus versus infantry of 24, you're looking at 72 damage. It's being divided 4 times. That is 18 damage per model. The Brave Shaman of Shadows is doing 300 damage a swing, and that's 324, which is basically irrelevant. It puts you up to 83, but it does mean that every single swing, especially on the charge when it's buffed up a bunch, every single swing is killing entire models. Because the splash is divided up against a maximum of 4 models, there's a chance it's only divided up among 3 or something, if you're depending on exactly where you're hitting, and suddenly that means that 300 damage translates to multiple dead models all at once. This is a huge benefit, and this makes heroic chariots much more useful against infantry mobs, in my opinion, especially when you consider cost. Now, certainly there are disadvantages. There's lower HP, which can make a difference if you're worried about, say, artillery sniping your unit. Or at least it can make a difference if you're worried about that. In this case, certainly there might be some stat differences. This guy does have less in basically every single stat line, including something like melee defense, than a normal Razor Gore chariot. But, big but here, that is still not, in my opinion, as important as just being able to pick off entire models. There's just such a valuable thing on heroic chariots. It is what makes Cetra's chariot incredibly useful, because Cetra, with his monstrous weapon strength, is really strong. Now, unfortunately here I don't have Kazrak on a chariot, but we can quickly concede defeat here. We totally lost. But we can concede defeat here quickly. You can see 13 models. It's a great job in just a single pass. If we look at Kazrak on his chariot, he's got 400 damage, and this is divided up 4 times. This is divided up just 4 times, which means he's picking off multiple models with every charge. It makes him brutal against even relatively elite infantry. And this is why, in short, if you're looking to bring chariot units, if you have the space, assuming you're not scrounging for space in your army, if you bring several heroes, this might not be possible. But assuming you're not scrounging, you should bring a heroic chariot, in my opinion, over a normal unit chariot, because the damage, while the damage output will be comparable between the 2 units, the normal units generally compensating for their lower damage with the fact that their bonus is applied on more models, with the fact that they're getting more impact damage, and that sort of stuff. While the damage output is definitely comparable or roughly the same, the actual kill count, the body count, is going to be much different. And the body count does matter. It does make a significant difference in the grand scheme of things. And so that is why I would recommend bringing a hero character. Now, one thing I do want to do before finishing this up is I do want to open up a tab just to show some of these differences and show how much of an impact this could potentially have in a game. Or theoretically, how much of an impact this can have in a game. So here we are on the Total War Warhammer Stats.com, and this is a great site that I only recently found, and for those of you interested, I will be sure to leave a link down below for you guys. But if we can look here at the stats, you can see this difference in max splash value. So you can see over here on the chariot, this is the chariot variant, the Razor Gore chariot, you've got maximum 4 splash attacks. Similarly, Kazrak, 1 eye on his chariot, also maximum 4 splash attacks. If we keep going through and finally find the Razor Gore chariots, I'm not entirely sure where they are on this list. There we go, here's the Razor Gore. You can see they've also got a max splash attack value of 4. Now, there's no mention here of area of effect, and unfortunately, there's no way really, you can see here there's distribution, and unfortunately there's just no way of determining how exactly big the splash damage is. But it's a safe assumption to say the splash area is probably fairly comparable on the 2, I think. And because of that, the Razor Gore chariots are just not that good at killing infantry models. You can see divided by 4, that 48 weapon strength becomes, well, it's like you do get the bonus for infantry, so 72, it just becomes much less effective. You're dropping to a weapon strength of 18. maximum against each unit, which if you're hitting multiple models, that can still make a big difference. That can still be a lot of damage, but it's not comparable in model sniping to the power of a Lord on a Chariot. And I do want to sort of touch on just how much you can do with this, how much of a difference it can make when you're trying to roll over some units. Like, for example, let's look at Swordmasters of Hoeth, pretty elite and expensive infantry. And when we look at it, their HP, if we look at their health size, you can actually see their HP per model. Swordmasters of Hoeth only have 80 HP per model. That means that if you're on the charge and you've got your bonus active, you can basically be killing a model with every impact. Especially when you calculate in the fact that you're also doing some impact damage in there as well. You're going to be killing potentially 3-4 models a swing, which is on an high elf unit is incredibly valuable, especially with the way martial prowess works. That is super useful. White Lion, 73 model HP per model. Phoenix Guard, it might be a little difficult because they do have physical resist, but nonetheless, you can always buff yourself with a Occam's Mind Racer or something that gave you more damage. And you can see that you can just chip these units down much more effectively with a Chariot, where you might not be able to do so with normal units. Even if we look at the most elite infantry, it's important to keep in mind that also that Chosen and Black Orcs, who do have a lot more HP, and I'm kind of struggling here to find because this is a very lengthy list, and unfortunately you can only, I'm not entirely sure if there's a way to find exactly what I want here, but it does, I think greenskins might actually be on the other side of the thing. But if we quickly scroll through, if we can find Chosen, that would be nice. But if we look at Chosen at Halberds, for example, they've got 131 HP per model. You know, if you're only hitting 2 or 3 models, that could potentially mean you're picking off a model fairly efficiently. Especially, the other thing is that you can stay and grind a little bit better, I think, with a Heroic Chariot. You can kind of dive in and hit, even if you're just clipping the edge of a unit, take off a few models and get out. These models are generally bigger as well on the Chaos Warriors or Chosen, so you can often get a little more value that way. And actually, now that I think about it, why not? Let's just test it out and see how this does against, say, a unit of Black Orcs who have the highest HP per model in the game. I do believe 136. I'm not going to check it right now. So we will try to do 3 tests this time. We're going to run the first test is going to be with Kazrak One-Eye. So Kazrak does have higher weapon strength. He's sitting at 400, and he does have better stats overall. So this is definitely worth mentioning, but let's see just how well the Heroic Chariot. He's not the best of chariots either. If you look at Cetra, for example, he's even tougher. He's definitely a much meaner fella. But if we look at the Black Orcs, you can see immediately 6 models of Black Orcs chipped off on the charge by Kazrak. That is a pretty solid investment. How you can see he's also knocked them down they're down 6,000 from their starting of like over 8,000. What is their HP? It's like 8,100. So he's done a lot of work in that single charge. Now, to be fair, with the fact that, see, he's taken off about 8 models. Now he's going to have to extricate himself, or he'd have to push through, whatever. How exactly this will work in a practical game, there might be some issues just because you're going to get surrounded and beaten down. If there's some nasty skulkers, you could be in a bad spot. But 8 models taken off. Now, if we take... Let's try to take the Caster and see if in this case it might make a little bit more of a difference, because the Caster does have lower weapon strength. 300, while still a respectable amount and still distributing relatively well, should mean about 2 hits per Black Orc, maybe more because of the armor, which could be not so good. Black Orcs do have 136 HP. That could mean 2 to 3 hits, which can make this guy much less effective. So we're going to try our good friend at the Brave Shaman of Shadows here and see how he does. I'm not expecting him to do as well as Kazrak, of course. Kazrak being an absolute beast on his chariot, though not quite on par with, say, Cetra. I think Cetra is the best chariot by far in the game. But if we get, after all, his chariot is the chariot of the gods, not some measly loser chariot. But you can see we do get a nice little attack here. But unfortunately, really, I'm not entirely sure what that... I'm not even sure if he got his full charge off, because, to be quite honest, that didn't even seem like a full charge. That was a very low damage. Suspiciously low. We're going to try one more time. We can try one more time real quick. We can see defeat and rematch. I think there might have been a little bit of an odd charge there. Fortunately, I probably should have just turned off the lords, but oh well. Laziness is getting the better of me. Let's see how good old Kazrak, or how good old Shaman 2-Eye over here does, if he gets a proper, hopefully a better charge. I don't know if there was a mistake with the charge there or what happened, because that was very low damage. Maybe it was just supposed to be that low, but it felt too low. But we're going to charge in here against the Black Orcs. You can see we're going to get a nice meaty charge, hopefully performing a little better. Yeah, that was definitely a better connection there. We're going to get some swings. And, you know, yeah, we've already knocked off about 1,000 HP, but unfortunately you can see we're getting much more bogged down. We do actually take a model off, but definitely not where we want to be in life, and definitely that went much worse. So we took 2 models off, but that definitely goes much worse. But then if we try and, let's see how the triple chariot does. And this is something worth considering, is how much of a difference. That was about 1,000 HP off. After that you get stuck in, but usually you have some way of extricating yourself. Usually you're going to be charging around your own troops. You can pull through your own line. You can flank around, whatever. There's other ways of playing around that. Whereas, so we'll definitely see how this goes. And I'm not necessarily saying they're the best against Black Orcs, but it's the best to use Chariots against Black Orcs. I think for a lot of factions it's definitely better alternatives. But if we get a nice little charge here, you can see these guys still in there, 8,100 HP. We do get a nice meaty charge in there. And first of all, the damage is about the same. And the Black Orcs, you know, they haven't actually lost a model yet. They're still sitting at 6,800 here. We are trying to pull through. We are not doing too well at pulling through. We're going to get a few... It doesn't even look like we're going to be able to extricate ourselves, which is kind of bad. Black Orcs, another thing worth mentioning, and I don't think that's actually listed in that spreadsheet, is Black Orcs have very high mass. But you can see we actually enacted much more damage there, and partially, in no small part, just because of the micro issue. But despite that, the Black Orcs didn't lose a single model. So I think that shows just the difference. And we did take quite a beating, both on them and the Shaman. Only Kazrak got away with OK HP. So I do think that is worth mentioning. I do think it's worth examining that. And I hope this gives you guys some idea of if you're looking to use Chariots, and I know Chariots usually are a unit that takes up a lot of micros, so you don't want to be fielding more than like 2 at most. 2 serious Chariots. Obviously I don't mean like Plague Furnaces or something. Those are not really much of a chariot. But why you should bring, probably, if you don't need your lord or heroes to do something else specifically, why you should bring Chariots, again, your heroic Chariots to the fight rather than normal Chariots. The damage output difference is simply very important. Sniping models versus not sniping models is a very significant difference and very tangible. So, I do hope this was informative, guys. I do hope this was a helpful or educational or whatever you want to call it video. I do hope you guys found it interesting, at least, and hopefully if any of you are interested, you can go check out that site, the Total War Warhammer stats. As far as I'm aware, those stats are accurate, and it's definitely nifty to see them. See a lot of those hidden stats like attack speed and all that, and see how they are. If you have any comments, any criticism, if you don't agree with me, if you think it's actually better to run normal conventional Chariots, if you have different experiences, or if you don't agree with my methodology or think I'm doing something wrong here, as usual, be willing to share, be willing to mention. I'd love to hear what you guys think. If you have any other input, as usual, this is meant to be helpful, and so if you've got additional input, be sure to share it. As usual, guys, I do very much appreciate you all for watching, and I will see you all in the next one. Wyvern out.